There are moments in life that change you forever. Moments you never see coming until they've already happened. And then, suddenly, you're standing there, looking at the mess you've made, asking yourself, how did I get here? I never thought I would be that woman. I never thought I would cross that line. But the truth is, no one ever does until they do. I never set out to betray my husband. But when his boss kept staring at me, something inside me shifted. And that's when everything changed. I felt it before I saw it. That sensation, like someone's eyes are on you, like heat on your skin. And when I turned, my husband's boss was looking right at me. Not in passing. Not casually. He was staring. Holding my gaze, studying me, like he was seeing something he shouldn't. And I should have looked away. I could have. But I didn't. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. You ever feel invisible? Like you're just existing, moving through life unnoticed? That was me. My husband had stopped looking at me years ago. And yet, here was this man, watching me like I was something worth noticing. And here's the worst part. I liked it. I should have walked away. I should have ignored it. But instead, I let it happen. I let him look. And deep down, I knew that was the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to undo. So tell me, have you ever wanted attention from the last person you should? Have you ever felt that pull, that temptation you never expected? If so, you're not alone. Drop a comment below if you've ever felt that spark, something so small, so innocent, but something that made you question everything. And don't forget to subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga for more true stories that will leave you speechless. Because this was only the beginning. 8 years. That's how long I had been married. Long enough for love to settle into something quiet, something predictable. Long enough for passion to fade into routine, for stolen kisses to turn into brief nods in passing. Long enough for my husband to stop looking at me the way he once did. He was a good man, at least I told myself he was. A provider, responsible, always working, always moving. He left early, came home late, his mind filled with numbers, deadlines, and business calls. And me? I had become an afterthought. A fixture in the home, a shadow in the background of his life. I don't think he meant to neglect me. But that's the thing about neglect, it doesn't have to be intentional to hurt. At first, I tried. I really did. I'd get dressed up for dinner, hoping he'd notice. I'd send texts, little reminders of us, of what we used to be. I'd reach for him at night, only to find him already asleep or too tired to care. After a while, I stopped trying. I stopped hoping. I stopped expecting. And then, there was him. Mr. Carter. My husband's boss. The kind of man who walked into a room and commanded attention without saying a word. There was something about him, effortless confidence, quiet power. He had the presence of a man who never had to try too hard. And maybe that was what made him so dangerous. I had seen him before, of course. At company events, in passing. But I had never noticed him. Not really. Not until that night. It was a formal dinner, one of those business gatherings where wives tagged along to smile and nod while their husbands talked shop. The restaurant was elegant, dimly lit, the kind of place where the air smelled like expensive wine and hushed conversations. Waiters moved silently between tables, carrying trays of delicate appetizers, crystal glasses clinking softly against polished wood. I wore a black dress that night. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, at least, that's what I told myself, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to feel beautiful, to feel like a woman again. My husband barely looked at me when I walked out of the bedroom. Just a quick glance, a distracted, "You look nice," before turning back to his phone. But Mr. Carter? He noticed. I felt it the moment we arrived. That quiet intensity in his gaze, like he was seeing something he wasn't supposed to. Like he was memorizing details, my lips, my collarbone, the way the fabric of my dress hugged my waist. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But then, he smiled. A slow, knowing smile, just the hint of amusement in his eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. I should have looked away. I should have ignored it. But instead, I held his gaze just a second too long. Just enough to acknowledge that I felt it too. My husband sat beside me at the table, absorbed in conversation, oblivious. Across from me, Mr. Carter's voice was smooth, effortless as he spoke about business, investments, the market. But every so often, his eyes would flicker to mine. Subtle. Intentional. I tried to focus on my husband's words, on the conversation swirling around us. But my mind was elsewhere. My skin tingled where Mr. Carter's eyes had lingered. My pulse quickened whenever he shifted in his seat, whenever his fingers drummed lightly against the table, whenever his voice lowered just slightly, like he was speaking only to me. And then, just as the waiter poured another glass of wine, he leaned in, close enough that only I could hear. "Your husband is a lucky man," he said, his voice smooth, deliberate. I wonder if he knows it. A simple sentence. Harmless on the surface. But the way he said it, the way his eyes held mine, it wasn't harmless at all. My breath hitched. My fingers curled around the stem of my glass. My husband, still distracted, still engaged in conversation, didn't notice a thing. And in that moment, I realized something. Mr. Carter wasn't just looking at me. He was watching me, testing me, waiting to see how I would respond. And God help me. I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't look away. I should have let it go. It was just a look. A simple compliment. Nothing more. But the thing about moments like these is that they don't just disappear. They linger. They stay with you in ways you don't expect. After that night, I told myself it was nothing. That Mr. Carter was just being polite. That I had imagined the weight of his stare, the meaning behind his words. But deep down, I knew better. Because when a man looks at you the way he did, you feel it. And I felt it. I felt it long after the dinner ended, long after my husband and I got home, long after I lay in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling while he scrolled through emails on his phone. I turned to face him, hoping, just hoping that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe he'd sense that something was off. Maybe he'd finally look at me, really look at me. But he never did. I closed my eyes, willing myself to sleep. But all I could see in the darkness was Mr. Carter's face, the way he had held my gaze, the way his words had wrapped around me like silk. The next time I saw him, it was at my husband's office. I had stopped by to drop off lunch, a habit I had forced myself into, a way to remind my husband that I still cared, that I still tried, even when it felt like I was the only one putting in the effort. His office was the same as always, cold, sterile, filled with the quiet hum of business. My husband barely looked up when I walked in. Just a quick glance before he muttered something about a meeting and pointed to his desk, gesturing for me to leave the food there. And then, I felt it again. That same sensation. That same heat on my skin. The feeling of being watched. I turned, and there he was. Mr. Carter. Standing in the doorway of his own office, leaning against the frame like he had all the time in the world. And he was staring at me again. Slow. Intentional. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the paper bag in my hands. I shouldn't have looked. I should have turned away. But instead, I met his eyes. And just like before, he didn't look away. "You're a good wife," he said, his voice smooth, unreadable. "Your husband is lucky." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Low. Measured. Like there was something else beneath them. I forced a laugh, trying to brush it off. "I think he forgets that sometimes," I said before I could stop myself. Mr. Carter's gaze didn't waver. Then maybe someone should remind him. My breath caught. My heart pounded. And for a brief, terrifying moment, I wasn't sure if we were still talking about my husband at all. I felt my pulse in my throat as I turned away, muttering some excuse, something about needing to leave. But as I walked out of the office, I could still feel his eyes on me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. That should have been the end of it. A harmless moment. A fleeting thought. But the thing about temptation? It doesn't knock on your door and introduce itself. It creeps in slowly, slipping through the cracks, settling in the places you don't expect. And once it's there, it's almost impossible to ignore. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, studying my reflection in a way I hadn't in years. I smoothed my dress, ran my fingers through my hair, tilted my chin just slightly. And then I whispered the question that had been haunting me since the moment Mr. Carter looked at me that way. Was it just a stare? Or was it something more? That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in around me. My husband was beside me, his breathing steady, lost in sleep, while my mind raced with thoughts I didn't want to have. I told myself it was nothing. Just a stare. Just words. A meaningless moment in an otherwise ordinary day. But if that were true, why couldn't I stop thinking about it? Why did it feel so thrilling? I turned onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter around me, as if that could shield me from the questions creeping into my mind. Was I overthinking it? Was I imagining the weight of his gaze, the way his voice wrapped around me like silk? Or was there something more? And if there was something more, what did that say about me? I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the thoughts away. But the truth was undeniable. I had liked it. The attention, the feeling of being seen, it had sparked something inside me that I hadn't felt in years. And that scared me more than anything. Because if I was craving the attention of another man, then what did that mean about my marriage? I rolled onto my back again, stealing a glance at my husband. He was turned away from me, his body curled slightly toward the edge of the bed, as if even in sleep, the space between us had grown too wide to cross. I thought about the last time he had looked at me that way, the last time he had made me feel like I mattered. I couldn't remember. Would he even care if another man desired me? If another man noticed what he had long since stopped seeing? Would it even make a difference? A knot formed in my stomach, a tight, twisting guilt that wouldn't let go. I loved my husband. I did. Or at least I had. But love had turned into something else, something quiet, something familiar, something that no longer set my skin on fire. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe I had spent so much time convincing myself that love was supposed to settle, that passion was something that faded with time, that I had stopped questioning whether I still felt it at all. I exhaled slowly, my fingers gripping the blanket, my mind scrambling for justifications. It was just a look. A compliment means nothing. I did nothing wrong. And yet, I had felt something. Something real. Something dangerous. And deep down I knew. This wasn't about Mr. Carter. Not really. This was about the hollow space inside me, the emptiness I had been ignoring for too long. He had just been the first person to notice it. I told myself I wouldn't see him again. That I wouldn't let my mind wander to places it shouldn't go. But even as I made that promise, I knew it was a lie. Because the truth was, I wanted to see him again. And the scariest part? I knew exactly where to find him. I told myself I wouldn't think about him. That I would forget the way his voice curled around me like smoke, the way his eyes lingered just a second too long. But some things aren't so easy to forget. Some moments sink into you, settle beneath your skin, and refuse to let go. I went about my days as if nothing had changed, because nothing had changed, right? I was still a wife. Still faithful. Still doing everything I was supposed to do. But at night, when the house was silent and my husband lay beside me, lost in sleep or lost in his phone, I felt it. That restless energy inside me. That pull towards something I couldn't name. And then came the second encounter. Another event. Another work function, another evening spent smiling and nodding while my husband drowned himself in business talk. I hadn't wanted to go, but he insisted, told me it would look good for me to be there. As if I were just another extension of him, another box to check off in his perfectly curated world. I stood by his side at the bar, my fingers wrapped around the stem of a half-empty wine glass, nodding at the right times, laughing when I was supposed to. But my mind wasn't there. My mind was across the room. Because Mr. Carter was there. And I felt his presence before I even saw him. It was like gravity, an unseen force tugging me toward him, making my skin prickle with awareness. And then, as if he could sense my thoughts, I heard his voice behind me. "You look beautiful tonight." I turned before I could stop myself. He was close, too close. Close enough that I caught the faintest hint of his cologne, something deep, something dark. His eyes held mine, steady, unreadable, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. I forced a small laugh, shaking my head. You always say the right things, don't you? His lips quirked at the corner, but he didn't look away. No, he said smoothly. Just the true things. I should have ended the conversation there. Should have walked away. But then he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping just low enough for only me to hear. A woman like you shouldn't feel invisible. My breath caught. The words sank into me, slipping beneath every layer of self-control I had left. Because how did he know? How did he see me so clearly when my own husband couldn't? I felt my face warm, a flush creeping up my neck. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That I wasn't invisible. That I didn't need to be seen. But I didn't say any of those things. Because the truth was, I did need it. And we both knew it. My husband called my name then, barely looking in my direction, motioning for me to follow him as he moved toward a group of men in tailored suits. I was still holding my wine glass, my fingers trembling slightly around the stem. I turned to go, but as I moved past Mr. Carter, something happened. A touch. Brief. Barely there. His hand grazed my lower back, light, intentional, just enough to send a shiver up my spine. I froze. Just for a second. Just long enough for our eyes to meet. And in that second, everything shifted. Because now, there was no denying it. No pretending it was all in my head. This wasn't harmless. This wasn't innocent. This was something. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stepped away, my movements slow, careful, as if anything too sudden would shatter the fragile line I was still trying to convince myself hadn't been crossed. I felt the weight of his gaze on me as I walked away, felt the burn of it against my skin, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel numb. I felt alive. And that was the most dangerous feeling of all. I should have known it was coming. I should have seen the signs, the slow unraveling of the distance I had promised to keep. But by the time I realized how deep I had fallen, it was already too late. The business trip was my husband's idea. He said it would be good for us, though I wasn't sure he even knew what us meant anymore. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. Maybe deep down, I wanted to believe that something could shift between us. That maybe, in a different city, away from the distractions of work and routine, he'd finally see me again. But my husband wasn't the one I should have been thinking about. Because Mr. Carter was there too. The flight was uneventful. My husband worked the entire time, laptop open, fingers tapping against the keyboard, lost in numbers and deadlines. I stared out the window, watching the clouds roll by, pretending I wasn't aware of the man sitting just a few rows behind us. I felt him before I saw him. That same pull, that same awareness. And when we landed, when we stepped into the hotel lobby, my husband too distracted to notice anything but his phone, Mr. Carter's eyes met mine from across the room. Just for a second. Just long enough for my breath to catch. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining things. But I wasn't. That night, after a long day of meetings and conference calls, my husband went up to our room early, muttering something about catching up on emails. He didn't ask if I wanted to join him. He barely looked at me when he walked away. And so, without thinking, without planning, I found myself in the hotel bar instead. And I wasn't alone. Mr. Carter was already there, seated at the far end of the dimly lit lounge, a half-empty glass of bourbon in front of him. He looked up as I approached, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick, humming with something neither of us acknowledged. I should have walked away. I should have gone upstairs. But instead, I sat down. One drink, I told myself. Just one. Just a few minutes of conversation. Just a harmless moment in a place where no one knew us. But one drink turned into two. Then three. And with every sip, the space between us grew smaller. We talked, but I can't even remember what about. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the words were just a distraction from the real conversation, the one happening in the way his eyes held mine, in the way my pulse quickened every time his fingers tapped against his glass. At some point, the silence stretched between us. A quiet moment, charged and fragile, the kind that makes your stomach flip, makes your hands tremble slightly against the table. He reached for his drink, and as he did, his fingers brushed against my wrist. A featherlight touch. Barely there. But it was enough. Enough to make me inhale sharply. Enough to send a shiver down my spine. Enough to make me realize, in that exact moment, that I wasn't resisting anymore. His eyes searched mine, as if waiting, as if giving me one last chance to stop this before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But I didn't move. I didn't pull away. And then he kissed me. Soft at first. Hesitant. Just a whisper of his lips against mine, testing, waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't. And when I didn't, he deepened it, one hand coming up to cradle my jaw, his fingers tilting my chin, his body angling closer. The world around us disappeared. The low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the music playing faintly in the background, it all faded into nothing. The only thing that existed was this. His lips. His warmth. The way my entire body ignited under his touch. For the first time in years, I felt something real. Something raw. Something alive. And then, just as quickly as it started, it ended. I pulled back first, my breathing unsteady, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. His eyes were dark, unreadable, his lips slightly parted like he was about to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't look at him. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked away, my legs shaking beneath me. As I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing in front of me, I touched my lips with trembling fingers, the ghost of his kiss still burning against my skin. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. I woke up in my hotel bed, the room still wrapped in the dim hush of early morning. My husband's back was to me, his body curled toward the edge of the mattress, as if even in sleep, he was somewhere else entirely. I stared at the ceiling, my breath slow, controlled, but my mind was anything but. I wasn't thinking about the man lying beside me. I was thinking about him. The ghost of last night was still on my skin, in the air, thick like perfume I couldn't wash away. The taste of the kiss lingered, the warmth of his touch still burned into my wrist, my lips, my throat. My body still remembered, even if I wanted to forget. I turned onto my side, facing my husband, studying the lines of his face, the peaceful stillness of his sleep. He looked the same. Everything looked the same. And yet, everything had changed. Guilt crept in slowly, curling around my ribs, tightening with every breath. What had I done? What if he found out? What if last night had been a mistake? I forced myself to push the thoughts away, to swallow them down, to act normal. I got up, showered, let the hot water scald my skin as if it could wash away the memory of what I had done. But even as I stood beneath the pounding spray, my fingers traced my lips, and my stomach clenched at the rush of something I refused to name. Regret? No, that wasn't it. I stepped out, wrapped myself in a towel, avoided my own reflection in the mirror. My husband was already awake, already dressed, already answering emails on his phone. He didn't even look up when I walked out of the bathroom. Just a distracted morning before he went back to whatever was more important than me. And in that moment, the guilt wavered. Just for a second. Because wasn't this the problem? Wasn't this the reason I had let myself fall into something dangerous in the first place? I pulled on my dress from the night before, my hands shaky as I fastened the zipper, my heart racing at the thought of seeing him again. Would he act normal? Would he acknowledge what happened? Would he regret it? The conference was in the hotel's banquet hall, a sea of suits and polite conversation. My husband had already disappeared into a cluster of colleagues, his presence swallowed up in business talk, and I stood alone, fingers curled around the stem of a coffee cup, scanning the room before I even realized what I was looking for. And then, I saw him. Mr. Carter. Standing near the far end of the hall, engaged in conversation with a group of executives, his posture relaxed, unreadable. If last night had affected him at all, he didn't show it. No stolen glances, no hesitation, no indication that anything had changed between us. It was normal. Too normal. And that's when the paranoia set in. Did he regret it? Had it meant nothing to him? Was he already forgetting it, erasing it from his memory like it had never happened at all? My fingers tightened around my cup. My stomach twisted. What if I was the only one who couldn't let go? I exhaled slowly, forced myself to turn away, to steady my breathing, to pretend everything was fine. But the thoughts wouldn't stop racing. What if he didn't forget? What if he told someone? What if this got out? What if my husband found out? I stole another glance in his direction, and that's when it happened. So quick, so subtle, I almost missed it. The shift of his gaze. The slightest curve of his lips. A smirk. Just for me. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. I told myself it was just a mistake. One impulsive, reckless mistake. I told myself I could move on, bury it, pretend it never happened. But some mistakes don't fade. Some mistakes take root, wrapping around you like vines, pulling you deeper even when you swear you won't let them. I sat in the hotel room that night, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who had arrived 2 days ago. She wasn't the same wife, the same person. She had done something irreversible, something she could never take back. I traced my fingers over my lips, remembering the way he had kissed me. The way I had let him. The way I had wanted it. And the worst part? The guilt wasn't strong enough to erase the craving. If it had been, I would have walked away already. I turned my head slightly, listening to the faint hum of my husband's voice coming from the other room. He was on a call, as usual, talking about profits and projections, about deals and deadlines. I could count the number of times he had spoken to me today on one hand. And yet, I was supposed to feel guilty? I was supposed to be the villain in this story. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hands curling into fists on my lap. Maybe I was the villain. Maybe there was no excuse for what I had done. Maybe, if the roles were reversed, I would be devastated, broken, if I found out my husband had done what I had done. But then why? Why did I feel so empty every time I thought about going back to the way things were? I tried to picture it, tried to imagine stepping back into my life, into my marriage, pretending that nothing had changed. Pretending that I was still satisfied, still happy, still fulfilled. But the image felt hollow. Like something I had already outgrown. I thought about Mr. Carter. About the way he had looked at me, like I was something more than just a wife. More than just someone's second thought. The way his voice had wrapped around me, filling the spaces my husband had left empty. The way he had touched me, like he knew exactly what I needed, exactly how starved I had been for something to remind me that I was still alive. I hated myself for wanting more. For still feeling the burn of his touch. For wondering what would have happened if I hadn't pulled away so soon. I had a choice. I could stop this now, sever whatever thread was left before it unraveled completely. I could go back to my life, to my husband, to my quiet, numb existence. I could pretend this had never happened. Or, I could go deeper. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, debating, hesitating, knowing that once I made this choice, there would be no turning back. One message. One step forward. That's all it would take. My thumb hovered over the screen. My breath was shaky, my mind screaming at me to stop, to pull back before it was too late. And yet, I couldn't deny what I already knew. This wasn't over. Sometimes, you don't realize you've destroyed something until it's in pieces at your feet. You tell yourself you'll stop, that you won't cross the line, that you're in control. And then one day, you look around, and the life you thought you had is gone. Shattered. Unrecognizable. I don't know when I lost control. Maybe it was the first time I held his gaze too long. Maybe it was the moment I let him touch me and didn't pull away. Or maybe it happened long before that. Maybe it started the moment I realized my husband stopped seeing me. Would it have been different if I had fought harder? If I had tried to fix my marriage instead of searching for something outside of it? Or was I always meant to end up here, in this mess I created with my own hands? I don't have the answers. All I have is the truth, the raw, painful truth of what I've done. And now I have to live with it. But tell me, Have you ever found yourself standing at the edge of a choice you knew was wrong, and still you couldn't make yourself walk away? Have you ever felt the pull of something you knew could ruin you, and yet you wanted it anyway? I need to know I'm not the only one. I need to know if you've ever been in a situation where you saw the danger, saw the wreckage ahead, but still couldn't stop yourself from taking that step forward. Comment below. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you think I should have walked away. Or tell me if you understand why I didn't. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga for more true stories that will leave you questioning everything. Because sometimes the hardest part of a story is knowing how it ends.